air it out. Down the field. Catch and a touchdown.
It's College Football Pick'em, presented by Harbor Jiu Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. Here's your host, Nick Kosko.
Welcome inside the College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio, presented by Harbor Jiu Jitsu, located inside the Attila's Gym in Egg Harbor Township. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. We have another great college football slate here today. And boy, we are getting into the crux of things. The college football playoff rankings come out this coming week, and I am excited as we're finally going to get a look at how the College Football Playoff Committee is going to shake out these rankings, how they're going to rate everyone's strength of schedule, the eye test, all those things, how they're going to weigh the COVID concerns throughout the entire season. So we have a lot to dive into as college football hits past the midway point of November. Now it's Thanksgiving next weekend, so a happy early Thanksgiving to all of you out there, as we only see, of course, every Saturday right here on AM 1490, 8 to 9 a.m. So now we got the formalities out of the way. We're going to dive into what is going on in the week that was college football leading up to this. Again, another stacked weekend. There are games, again, postponed or canceled due to COVID. A lot of them, out in the Mountain West and Sun Belt, some American games were postponed. Pac-12 got hit again with Arizona State, Colorado. Houston, SMU, another one, a decent American conference matchup. The Maryland-Michigan State game, the Big Ten got hit again, and that's really what stinks for Maryland. They've now missed, this will be their second game they've missed now out of the first 5 weeks for the Big Ten, because they were supposed to play Ohio State last week, and of course they had COVID concerns. They could not play the Buckeyes. The Buckeyes, of course, as we know as of right now, are still on track to play Indiana at noon, barring anything unforeseen, of course. But we are into that point of the college football season where we see our contenders and we don't see our contenders. What is realistic here in terms of who's going to make a run at the college football playoff? And we're going to dive into some other things as well. Jim Harbaugh again. I mean, that seat is just getting hotter, and Michigan takes on Rutgers tonight in Piscataway at 7:30. So we'll dive into that. I do want to bring up that game as well later in the show, just because not only am I a Rutgers alum, but I don't talk too much Rutgers on this show because, frankly, well, they are irrelevant in terms of the the grand picture, or the big picture aspect of college football. They're not going to be a playoff contender. They're not even a Big Ten contender until maybe like 10 years down the line, or hopefully 5 years down the line when Greg Schiano fixes everything. But that game is huge in terms of program perception, and I'll talk about that later in the show. And I did something similar to that last year where I talked about those teams as well. So we'll dive into that in a little bit. But for now, let's talk big picture. Let's talk college football playoff, because there's a lot that hangs in the balance of this weekend, and we'll focus mainly on the top 10 right now, just because we don't have the college football playoff rankings. They don't come out till Tuesday. And then, those are realistically the teams that are going. Usually, if you're within the top 10 in that first rankings, you have a legit shot. Other teams outside the top 10, I could point to maybe Oregon, and then obviously maybe Indiana, depending upon how the week shakes out. But other than that, Oklahoma State, I'm not too certain. I'm not too certain at all as far as what the Big 12 can do, because especially if Oklahoma beats them, then there's no shot for the Big 12 to get in. Because I would say Oklahoma State is your best bet at this point. But so we'll stick with the top 10, and I want to kind of go. CBS Sports broke down a prediction of the top 10 playoff rankings. Just trying to predict them out through the first week, so to speak. So this is how they would be predicted to be shaken out, or to shake out. I would say the having Northwestern at 10 is ambitious, but they've earned it at 4-0. But they take on Wisconsin. So if you look at the AP poll, Northwestern is 19, right? They're 19. Wisconsin's number 10. They've only played 2 games, though, Wisconsin. And that is a huge game on the table for Northwestern, as they always play Wisconsin really well. That game's at 3:30 today. Now, as far as Northwestern in the college football playoff, now the Big Ten is firmly alive, because the 4 teams that are in play right now for the Big Ten for the college football playoff are obviously Ohio State. Indiana's in there now because they're an AP poll top 10 team. They're number 9 right now. Ohio State, of course, number 3. But you have Ohio State, Indiana. Wisconsin is obviously in play. And Northwestern, you have to give it to them because they are 4-0. And if they happen to win out, they deserve at least a top 10 ranking. Plus, with a big resume-boosting win over Wisconsin, hypothetically today, Northwestern is firmly in this playoff race because they can get to a Big Ten championship game. So, now, am I going to give Northwestern a legit shot to get to the playoff? No, because I frankly don't think they're going to beat Wisconsin today. Even they play them really well all the time. Over the last 6 years, they've played them close, and they've split their last 6 meetings 3-3. Despite the overall series record vastly in favor of Wisconsin. But I'll tell you what, Northwestern has a little mojo going, and they've won the one-score games. And Maryland, and the only team they blew out was Maryland, 43-3 back in the first week. Now, Maryland, aside from that first game, has looked pretty good with Tauli Tagovailoa, Tua's younger brother, leading the charge for Maryland. He had a bad first game, and then since then he's played 2 outstanding games, and we were really looking forward to that Maryland-Ohio State game last week. Unfortunately, didn't happen due to COVID. But I would say Northwestern they are legit. Now, are they a legit contender yet? No, but if they beat Wisconsin, they are firmly in the mix now because then you have to, I guess, you can't really eliminate Wisconsin entirely, but the problem is because of the truncated schedule and they're only playing 8 games, if Northwestern were to beat Wisconsin today, Wisconsin has 1 loss, they're 2-1. Don't forget, they've only played 2 games. Northwestern would be 5-0. If Wisconsin won out and played the rest of their games, they can only play 6 now. Don't forget, they can only play 6 because they've already missed 2, and they need to have at least 6 to be eligible for a conference championship game. If they finish 5-1, you would need Northwestern to lose at least 2. And I'm no math major, but I don't think they would necessarily win maybe they still get the percentage if they only lose 1 game to Northwestern. But if Northwestern has 2 losses, even if Northwestern finishes 6-2 and Wisconsin's 5-1, where does that math lie out for win percentage? Obviously, Northwestern has the head-to-head victory, but they have 2 losses, but they have 1 more win. So are they technically tied at that point? And if they are, the tiebreaker goes to Northwestern. So does Northwestern have to lose 3 games? And that'd be asking a lot. Say if Northwestern beats Wisconsin. They're 5-0, Wisconsin's 2-1, and they play the rest of their games, both teams. Hypothetically, you might need Northwestern at 5-0 to lose out, to lose 3 in a row, and Wisconsin to finish 5-1 over a 5-3 Northwestern team to get the edge to the conference championship game. In that scenario, could Wisconsin still make the playoff? Maybe, but they'd have to have a convincing win over a hypothetical undefeated Ohio State, or frankly a hypothetical undefeated Indiana team. And if they are 6-1 and they're conference champions and they knock off an undefeated team in Ohio State or Indiana, then you can make the argument Wisconsin gets in. But again, that lone loss is to Northwestern, which at that point would have 2, if not 3 losses just for Wisconsin to get to a title game. So is that really resume boosting there for Wisconsin? Not necessarily. They would have a huge win over Ohio State or Indiana, so to speak, in a Big Ten championship game, but that would not necessarily give them enough for the playoffs. So the way CBS Sports outlined it for their first prediction is from Jerry Palm. Their first predictions for the college football playoff rankings in the top 10, it's Northwestern 10, Cincinnati 9, we'll get to them in a second, Miami 8, we just mentioned Wisconsin, they're at number 7 right now, Florida number 6, Texas A&M 5, Clemson 4, Ohio State 3, Notre Dame 2, and Alabama 1. So it's very similar to the AP poll within the top 10. Similar. Not exact, but similar. Especially the top 6 are exact, actually. And Cincinnati drops 2 spots from the AP 7 to the predicted college football playoff rankings to 9. Now, again, the top 4 are blatantly obvious of how it's going to happen, or their paths at least I should say. Alabama's in a win and get in scenario, so is Notre Dame. So is Ohio State. So is Clemson. Now, can all four of those teams end up making the playoff anyway and stay where they are? Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that exact order, but those very well could be your four playoff teams anyway when it's all said and done. Because Ohio State can win out, win the Big Ten. Same with Alabama. They can win out, win the SEC. And then Notre Dame and Clemson, if Clemson beats them in an ACC championship game, when Trevor Lawrence comes back and they split and it's a close game, then you're probably going to get all four. They're both going to make it. They probably both will make it. And then you're going to have a scenario where it's probably Bama 1, Ohio State 2, Clemson's going to be 3, and then Notre Dame's going to be 4. So then you'd have Bama, Notre Dame, and Ohio State, Clemson. And that'd be, Ohio State, Clemson rematch from last year's semifinal. I'd sign up for that because I want to see Justin Fields and see what he can do in a rematch against, arguably the most consistent program over the last couple of years. So again, the top four have a path. Florida, Texas A&M, they have paths. We'll dive into them in a second. But I want to focus real quick on Cincinnati, then Miami, because again, the top 10. Again, if this is how the rankings shake out, the top 10 have a clear path. Some of it much harder than others, but anybody outside even this predicted top 10 doesn't seem to have a path. Unless Oregon's undefeated in the Pac-12 and they play every single game, I don't know if they can get in. Same with USC. USC right now, according to Jerry Palm, would be 15. And again, keep in mind, these are the predictions for the top 25 in the college football playoff rankings. So anybody outside the top 10, Oregon, USC, those are your probably two best bets for the Pac-12. Indiana's at 13, but they have a path. So I'll give them credit because they are undefeated right now. They have Ohio State today. Other teams like Georgia, to me, has no shot. Oklahoma State would need to win out and need some help. Coastal Carolina, they're not getting in. They're not getting in. Marshall not getting in. Iowa State, Tulsa, Louisiana. Tulsa had to win in the double overtime over Tulane on Thursday. Louisiana, Oklahoma, Liberty, Texas. Really, it's the top 10 or bust, and like three other teams outside the top 10: Oregon, USC, and Indiana. That's pretty much it. BYU's not getting in unless they somehow get big name packed. Maybe BYU plays in Oregon in a non-conference game if they end up allowing to schedule that, because the Pac-12 is leaning towards scheduling non-conference opponents for teams that miss out on games. But other than that, BYU's not going to get in either. So we outlined the Northwestern and Wisconsin scenarios. Wisconsin, if you just flip it, how we mentioned Northwestern, if they have the inside track, as long as Wisconsin wins out, they're going to be 6-0. They'll have the edge. Even if Northwestern's 7-1, Wisconsin won't have a loss and they'll have the head-to-head over Northwestern. So we look at Cincinnati. Now, they are the most fascinating team to me, but just because they are outside the Power 5. We've been kind of wax poetic about Cincinnati all season long because they have been absolutely dominant. Now, do I foresee them making the playoff? I don't, just because, again, we have never seen a Group of 5 team make the playoff. If there is a year for it to happen, it's this year. And now if Tulsa remains ranked in the AP poll, and again, it also, once the college football playoff rankings are out, that's the main ranking service when you talk about ranked matchups, because they'll use the AP poll and the coaches poll as well in terms to measure your strength of schedule. But once those playoff rankings come out, that top 25 is used. So if Tulsa actually is in the initial top 25, which I would think they would be because they're in the AP poll top 25, and then they won again on Thursday night, albeit a little bit lucky. Cincinnati did reschedule Tulsa, and nobody was really taking Tulsa seriously earlier in the year. They played Oklahoma State really close, but Oklahoma State struggled, and they lost they lost to everybody. They went down to their third quarterback at the start of the year. But the fact that Cincinnati has them rescheduled now, if they blow by Central Florida today, I would expect them to dominate. Temple's no good this year. I would expect them to absolutely throttle Temple on the 28th. On December 4th, they rescheduled the game against Tulsa. It's on the road, so Cincinnati has to play 3 straight road games. If they finish 10-0 with 3 straight road games, and they have Tulsa now, if Tulsa remains ranked at that point, if they beat a ranked Tulsa team, that's resume boosting again, because previously they beat Army 24-10 when Army was in the top 25. They destroyed SMU 42-13 when SMU was number 16 in the country, and that was on the road. Cincinnati, their closest game all year was the Army game in Week 2, 24-10. Otherwise, they've won by 35 points, 21 points, 29 points, 39 points, 28 points, and 38 points. They destroy everybody. And if they do that the rest of the way, have these convincing victories, Luke Fickell could have his team in the playoffs. He could. Look at the American Conference. I'll pull up the standings in a second. Of course, you would need the conference championship game to go. And if they're 11-0, I would say it's a foregone conclusion. Because right now, Cincinnati and Tulsa are 5-0 each in the conference. So could you hypothetically see Cincinnati beating Tulsa 2 times in a row? December 4th and then in a conference championship game, the American Conference? I could say it. I can most definitely say it. And if Cincinnati beats up on them twice, and finishes 11-0, Cincinnati has a legit case. Now they're going to get in if the top 4 shakes out like I said it would? No, of course, no, they won't because they don't have the strength of schedule. They'll be 11-0 in a conference champ, but it's outside the Power 5. I could see a scenario where Cincinnati finishes 11-0 in that instance, but the top 4 shakes out exactly how I outlined just a little bit ago, where Bama and Ohio State went out, Clemson beats Notre Dame in a close game in the ACC title game. Those are your top 4. Cincinnati's number 5. It could easily happen. And again, I know there's been rumors about, well, maybe the playoff will expand this year because it's 2020, and maybe they'll do it just for this year. It's not happening. I'd be shocked if the playoff actually expands at any point this year. Now, if it expanded, of course, I think Cincinnati would get in, and they should get in. But that's why it's so tough for these Group of 5 teams to get in, because since Cincinnati can look this dominant, go 11-0, and beat up on the second-best team in their conference 2 weeks in a row, hypothetically, and not get in. 11-0. And beat everybody on the schedule by double digits. Forget the 14-point margin with Army. Everybody on their schedule would be a double-digit victory should that happen. If they play at the rate they've been playing. They are a legit threat to make the playoff to me, but the problem is they need more things to shake out their way, including, maybe I would say if I'm Cincinnati, I'm rooting for Notre Dame the rest of the way, and to beat Clemson again and have Clemson have 2 losses. Because if Clemson has 2 losses, they're probably not getting in. There's no 2-loss team has ever made the playoff. Remember a handful of years ago when Penn State was a 2-loss Big Ten champion, and they beat Ohio State that year, but Ohio State only had the 1 loss, and they got in instead because Penn State had that terrible loss to Pittsburgh. That's the eye test for you. That's the eye test and strength of schedule, and why that second loss means so much. Because Penn State can beat Ohio State, win a Big Ten title, and still not get into the Final Four over Ohio State. Now, in hindsight, is that a big egregious error? As I didn't think it was. I think it's more egregious now looking back on it, but still, you can't have 2 losses. And the playoff committee's made that clear every single year. You cannot have 2 losses. As far as the other teams that are hanging around in the middle of the top 10 there in this predicted list, of course, Miami's only loss is to Clemson, but they would need one of Clemson or Notre Dame to kind of fall back a little bit because Miami does not play Notre Dame this year. They only have the 1 loss, and I get that, but they don't hold a tiebreaker over Clemson. So if they're tied with Clemson, Clemson gets the spot over them, and then I would expect at this point that Notre Dame finishes undefeated before the conference championship game. Now, I think you'd have to go by conference record and then common opponents between Miami and Notre Dame. And I think Miami would still be on the outside looking in just because of Notre Dame's win over Clemson, if you're going to go by common opponents. If they're tied. I think that's the big tiebreaker. So Miami needs Clemson to lose one more time and win out. Miami has to win out regardless to get to the title game. Win out, and they need Clemson to lose once, or they need Notre Dame to lose twice. Otherwise, they're not getting in. And that's and Miami is they could be in the top 8, but they're to me Cincinnati has a better shot to get in than Miami if we're being realistic here, because Miami needs too many things to go right, too many things to go their way in the ACC, in order to just make the championship game. And then at that point, if they make the championship game, they'll play Notre Dame or Clemson, and they'll have to beat them. They'll have to beat Clemson in a rematch, or they're going to have to beat Big Bad Notre Dame this year. So Miami's changes don't look good to me. We mentioned Wisconsin. Florida, it's the same scenario as Alabama. You win out, you get in. If you win out, you're going to be 10-1, 11-1. You'll beat Alabama. Now that could keep Alabama in if they're undefeated. That could keep 2 SEC teams in now. Could we get 2 SEC and 2 ACC? I don't think so, because if Ohio State wins out, they're getting in. Let's just say Florida wins out and they beat Alabama, right? They both have 1 loss. Ohio State wins out, right? Ohio State's going to be the number 1 seed. Because it also depends on Notre Dame. But Ohio State's getting in. Florida gets in because they're the champion in the SEC. Now, Bama only gets in, to me, if Notre Dame beats Clemson. Because Notre Dame will be undefeated, they'll get in. Let's just say Notre Dame's 1, Ohio State's 2, Florida's 3, Alabama's 4. Here's the crazy thing. Here's what happens. Here's the crazy scenario. Ohio State wins out, they get in. Florida wins out, they get in. They beat Alabama. Ohio State and Florida are definitely in. Clemson beats Notre Dame in a championship game. Clemson's in. Now what do? Notre Dame, with 1 loss, split against Clemson. Clemson's obviously in. Alabama, 1 loss, undefeated and dominant the whole year, but the 1 loss is to 1-loss Florida, who is in the SEC championship, in the SEC champion. What do? How do you weigh Alabama against Notre Dame? Strength of schedule? I would say the signs point to Notre Dame because they split with Clemson. But would they less? I mean, again, I know Clemson scored a lot of points and it went to overtime without Trevor Lawrence. DJ Uiagalelei was the quarterback. But does the committee make that a detriment to Notre Dame if Trevor Lawrence goes in there and beats up Notre Dame? And say, well, I mean, you beat Clemson, but Trevor Lawrence wasn't playing. Even though Clemson scored a lot of points, we get it. But what's the committee going to do? Will the committee just say, well, you should have beaten him twice. Or you would have lost if Trevor Lawrence played that first game. You can't play what ifs, though. And they're also going to say, well, Alabama, you were dominant all year. And you only lost to Florida, one of the best offenses we've seen in a while. It was a championship game, and it was a traditional conference rival. I mean, Notre Dame is just kind of coming in. I mean, who knows? At that's your biggest sticky situation right there. Or do you just say, screw it, neither of you get in, and Cincinnati gets in because they're 11-0 and a conference champion? There's your argument now for Cincinnati. Another one. At that point, do you knock out Notre Dame and Alabama and put Cincinnati in and make history? You have a real pickle on your hands there if we get to that point in the college football playoff rankings. All right, enough of that breakdown. Texas A&M, sorry, but I mean, they would need. I mean, again, they could have 1 loss. They could pull off a Ohio State situation over Penn State a couple years ago, but that's only if Bama loses twice, which they won't. But if they lost twice, then if they lost once, they have the tiebreaker over Texas A&M, and say they lost the conference championship game. Then A&M has the argument over Bama in the rankings, but maybe not for the playoff. I think Texas A&M would need a lot of things to break their way. They're number 5, though. They're number 5 in the AP poll, and they could be number 5 in the CFP rankings. So it's possible. They have a way to get in, but they have to win out and then just see how it shakes out. Because they're gonna be playing a waiting game, unfortunately, Texas A&M. All right, we're gonna step aside up against the break. We'll come back around and we will talk Jim Harbaugh, Michigan, and Rutgers. Yes, folks. Michigan, Rutgers. We're going to talk Michigan, Rutgers. We'll get into my picks later in the show. Keep it locked here. It's College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting.
Betting college football? You've come to the right place. It's College Football Pick'em, presented by Harbor Jiu Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Welcome back to College Football Pick'em right on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. We are presented by Harbor Jiu Jitsu, located inside the Attila's Gym in Egg Harbor Township. Be sure to check out their new schedule as well. Of course, Harbor Jiu Jitsu in action with the head coach and my good friend Al Bruce. We have classes Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Open mats on Sunday. We have some new morning classes. We have a no-gi jiu-jitsu fundamentals on Thursdays at 8 a.m. Do the same thing on Wednesdays with striking. The MMA striking is also on Wednesday mornings as well. And of course, you can have our standard classes. I'm in there on Tuesdays and Wednesdays during the evening. Starting at 5:30 with no-gi fundamentals, and then striking, then intermediate, and then of course live training on Tuesdays, and of course Wednesdays starting at 6 with striking and no-gi fundamentals, and of course some open mat. Go for some live training or just work on the moves you learn throughout the day. Thursday, same as Tuesday as well. So it's a great time. Get in there, Attila's Gym in Egg Harbor Township. Check out a free trial class. And, of course, you look up Harbor Jiu Jitsu on Instagram and Facebook as well to find out more information. You can also follow me on Twitter at Nick Kosko 59, NICK KOSKO 59. Follow our station, 1490 Sports Betting Radio on Twitter. Follow them at 1490 SportsBet. Follow our guys Rich Quinones and Ryan Rothstein as well at Rich QNQ and at Wise Rye. All right, we're going to dive into, and I think Rich saved me the embarrassment a little bit during our weekly session together. I call them sessions now, because we go back and forth on a lot of stuff aside from my picks each week. But you can catch Nick's picks on Back Your Play every Wednesday at 4:20 when Rich is on our very station. Now, he was giving me flack for defending Jim Harbaugh. I wasn't necessarily defending him, but I will say, of course, I'm of the logical mind that he has not performed to his contract. But here's where the wheels can completely come off. The wheels can completely come off this weekend. And I'll tell you why. Because they are playing Rutgers. All right, this is not to put my own school down, but Rutgers should not be on the same turf right now as Michigan. Now, Rutgers beat Michigan State earlier this year. They played Indiana competitively. I get that. They blew the game up, but Rutgers, they blew the game against Illinois. They showed some fight against Ohio State. So Rutgers is definitely in a much better situation than they were over the last 4 years with Chris Ash as the head coach. And if you go back before that, Kyle Floyd, who took over for Schiano after Schiano left for the NFL after his first stint with Rutgers, Rutgers was still in a good position. They missed out on a chance to win a Big East title in 2012. They would have went to the Orange Bowl that year, folks. Let's just put it that way. They blew a game against Louisville. 2014, Rutgers first in the Big Ten, 8-5, bowl game victory. They beat Michigan that year as well. The only time they've ever beaten Michigan in the Big Ten. They beat Indiana and Maryland that year as well. Should have beaten Penn State. Losing 13-10 with 5 turnovers. I'll go down a rabbit hole here, folks. Don't make me. But since then, Rutgers has gone down the slide, and it really just never came back up. You want to treat it like a roller coaster ride, but the roller coaster never came back up for some loops. It just went down in 2015. It went down in Chris Ash's first year. 2017, it was like that little. It was like I'm trying to think of the right word. A tiny little hill, in layman's terms. A tiny little hill. They went over a tiny little hill in 2017, winning 4 games somehow. And then 2018 and 2019 just went completely. They just completely bombed out, including 1-11 last year, just horrendous. In any event, Michigan is not good this year, and I was completely wrong. I will admit that I was completely wrong about Michigan this year. I thought the fact that they finally looked like a good quarterback in Joe Milton, they dominated Minnesota in the first weekend of the year for the Big Ten, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, Minnesota was an 11-win program last year, and wow, Michigan looks pretty darn good. They're gonna be a legit threat to Ohio State in 2020. Boy, was I wrong, because Minnesota's not good this year, and then Michigan proceeded to lose to Michigan State at home. They lost Indiana on the road. Now, granted, Indiana's better this year. They're top 10 now, but inexcusable for a program like Michigan. And then they were destroyed by Wisconsin last week at home. At home, no less, on national TV, 49-11. So where does Michigan go from here? They're not going to fire Harbaugh. I'm telling you, they are not going to fire him unless they bottom out and go 1-7. Where they're thinking to themselves, all right, if they're 1-7, then you might have to make a change to say, Jim, I know it was a COVID year, but everyone was dealing with COVID this year. 1-7 is unacceptable. Let's just, quote-unquote, mutually part ways. That is the only scenario I could see if they completely bottom out, right? Because they have Rutgers, Penn State, Maryland, and Ohio State left on the schedule. They're not beating Ohio State, so right there, that's 4 losses. I'm not so sure about Maryland and Penn State. Really, their best chance at another victory is tonight against Rutgers on the road. Now, could I see Michigan being 4-4, winning 3 in a row now against Rutgers, a bad Penn State team this year? Maryland is up and down. Now they're going to miss 2 games in a row, so who knows what happens with Maryland. But could I see Michigan winning 3 in a row and then just losing to Ohio State? Absolutely. I could absolutely see it. And they'll be 4-4. Yeah, then I mean, Jim Harbaugh basically saves his job and quiets. I mean, he doesn't really quiet everything down because the expectations are through the roof for Michigan. But does Jim Harbaugh say, yeah, buy me another year, we'll have a normal year next year, and then we'll see where we're at? Last year was contract, by the way, next year. So, again, that's another reason why they're not going to fire him. He has 1 year left. You might as well just play it out. You're not going to re-sign him unless he wins the Big Ten next year. He's not winning it. He's not going to win it this year. I could see Michigan finishing 4-4 now. They could beat Rutgers on the road. They'll host Penn State and Maryland. You're bound to win at least one of those games, and then you're not going to beat Ohio State. So 3-5, 4-4, I see for Michigan now at this point, after 3 horrendous losses, because they blew the game against Michigan State. A game they never should have lost. Even though they're 2-2 with 2 losses in a row to Indiana and Wisconsin, they are still saying the same things about Jim Harbaugh, no doubt. But I'll tell you this: the way Rutgers has fought this year, and again, they're the ones who beat up on Michigan State, who Michigan couldn't beat. Rutgers forced 7 turnovers in that game on the road. If you mean to tell me right now that Michigan cannot beat Rutgers in their rebuilding state, and again, as I mentioned before, and this is no bias on my part, despite the fact that you could look up all my credentials and say, wow, you went to Rutgers, you graduated from Rutgers, you broadcasted for Rutgers, you support Rutgers now, you even write about Rutgers a little bit for 24/7 Sports. This is not bias here, folks. Rutgers is a much better program than they were last year. This team fights. This team doesn't punt on 4th and 2 from the opponent's 35-yard line. This is a team that goes for it. This is a team that fights in the game until the end. This is a team that will use plays with 8 laterals to try to score, just to give the team a spark. They'll try anything because they're still below the level where you should be in the Big Ten in terms of the talent level, in terms of recruiting. Schiano's rebuilding that. It's going to take another year or 2 before this team is regularly a bowl contender, and then maybe could pull off some upsets in the Big Ten against the big bad boys, like Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Michigan State. But then again, they already beat Michigan State. If Rutgers beats Michigan, Rutgers has nothing to lose here. If they play a competitive game, even a bad Michigan team this year, Rutgers has nothing to lose by playing this football game. It's on primetime television. It's at 7:30. It's a Big Ten Network special at 7:30. All the pressure in the world is on Jim Harbaugh and the Wolverines. Jim Harbaugh might not get on that plane back to Ann Arbor if Michigan loses this football game. They're going to leave him in Piscataway. Greg might just say, "Hey, you want to split offensive coordinator duties with Sean Gleason next year? You can stay here. We'll put you in red next year. Here's your coaching job." Michigan has so much pressure in this football game. In fact, they probably have pressure to destroy Rutgers tonight. Rutgers has only beaten them once, 26-24 back in 2014. It was on a blocked field goal. Michigan was going for a 52, 53-yarder. Rutgers blocked the kick. They hung on for the victory. That was Rutgers' first Big Ten win ever. Since then, Michigan has owned the series. The closest game I can remember, including a 78-0 romp. 78-0. Oh, terrible. That was 2016 when Michigan came back to Piscataway. 78-0. And they beat him 52. They beat him 52-0 last year. The closest game since Rutgers' last victory over Michigan between these two schools was in 2017, when I was still a student and I was broadcasting the game for our student radio station in the Big House. Rutgers lost 35-14. It was 28-14 at one point, And if it weren't for Jim Harbaugh going from John O'Corn to Brandon Peters at quarterback, Rutgers might win that football game. So this series has never been close. You should fully expect Michigan to just wipe the floor clean with Rutgers, and I can't do that right now. I can't. I'm pretty sure the line opened at 7. You mean to tell me Rutgers can't cover this game with the way Michigan's been playing this year? If that isn't pressure on Jim Harbaugh, I don't know what is. He's got a lot to deal with this week. Even if Michigan wins, let's just say Michigan wins 24-20. Something like that, or 24-21. You think anybody's going to stop talking about Jim Harbaugh in the hot seat because you beat Rutgers by 3 points? We know Rutgers' national perception. You think anybody's going to talk about Jim Harbaugh? Wow, great win, coach. You beat Rutgers on the road. 24-21. That's great. Michigan is back. No way. Line open at 9, by the way. And the consensus across the board is 10.5. So people are putting their money on Michigan. We have one outlet has it at 12.5. Over/under set at 55. Rutgers is scoring more this year, so I could see it hitting the over. Michigan covering that 10.5. I don't know, folks. I really don't know. How do you trust the Wolverines after losing 3 in a row? And their lone win is over a Minnesota team that seems to be trending down this year. How do you trust Michigan? Now, Michigan Rutgers is not one of our games because I don't want to put my input on this because this game is, as a alum and a fan, it hurts me to bet with a better Rutgers game. We got the victory the one week against Indiana when we took Indiana, but we took Rutgers last week when they were finally favored in a Big Ten game for the first time in 6 years, and they lost to Illinois. So we're not touching the game. But all the pressure in the world is on Jim Harbaugh and Michigan. Rutgers has no pressure. If they win, it's a huge win. It's a program-defining win in the rebirth. It's Greg Schiano's first year back. You mean to tell me Rutgers wouldn't sign up for a 2-6 season, but the 2 wins are over Michigan and Michigan State? I'd sign up for that. I would love to see Rutgers beat up Jim Harbaugh. Wouldn't that be nice? Be nice for New Jersey fans. But look at this. I'm going to compare the team stats here. I'm not going to name names. You're going to be stunned. You are going to be stunned. Points per game. Both sides. I won't name teams yet. Points per game. 26.3 and 26.5. Points allowed per game. 34.5 and 34. Total yards. 377 and 329. Yards allowed. 425 and 418. Guess who's who? Rutgers averages more points per game by 0.2. Basically dead even. Points allowed per game. Michigan allows more points per game. So they're both basically -8 in the point differential department. Michigan allows a half point more in their games through 4 games. Michigan does have more total yards. Yards allowed. Michigan allows more yards. And here's what's alarming. They both allow, on average, over 100. The Rutgers averages, they give up 175 yards per game. Michigan gives up 178.5. That's not good either way. But Rutgers averages more yards rushing, 133, compared to Michigan's 117. Rutgers has awful quarterback play, and they still almost average 200 yards per game. Michigan only 260. And again, those numbers are probably skewed from the first game of the year. Joe Milton's had his moments, first 2 games, but he didn't do enough against Michigan State. I'm just telling you. I am just telling you. Look at the top receivers, by the way. Rutgers, who has no passing game, by the way. They really still don't. But a guy in Bo Melton, who, local flair down here, folks, for those listening in the Atlantic City area, local flair, Cedar Creek High School in Ann Arbor City, Bo Melton, 20 catches, 334 yards, 4 touchdowns. The kid's already having a career year through 4 games. Because he's finally in the right system. Bell, from Michigan, by the way, 18 catches, 325 yards, 1 touchdown. What's the problem here? What's the problem? Shouldn't those numbers be reversed? I mean, heck, Noah Vedral, Rutgers quarterback, has more touchdown passes than Joe Milton. He's less efficient. He's 82 of 130. Milton's 74 of 126. Actually, I don't even know now. I have to look at the percentages here. Milton's got more yards and less picks, but how does Vedral have more touchdowns? See, again, we're nitpicking stats now, but you see what I mean? Michigan's not in the right frame of mind here. According to ESPN's FPI, Michigan has a 63.5% chance to win this football game. In any normal year, folks, no matter where it is, Michigan would have a 89 to 92% chance to winning this game over Rutgers. So here, that's what I mean by all this pressure being on Jim Harbaugh. I'm not confident in the line. It's at 10.5 now, so now that it's double digits on the road, Rutgers a double-digit home dog? I don't know. You might want to place a couple shekels on Rutgers. $3 on Rutgers. I'm telling you, pressure is on Jim Harbaugh. He loses, he might as well start contacting NFL teams, or at least his agent should start contacting NFL franchises and saying, hey, are you going to have a coaching opening? Hey, Houston, you going to have a coach opening? Jim Harbaugh, Deshaun Watson. That'd be cool, right? Hey, Jets, you're going to have the number 1 overall pick, right? You can take Trevor Lawrence. You want Jim Harbaugh in there too? We'll give you Jim Harbaugh. Just to take him off, take him out of Ann Arbor. It'll be bad, folks. It'll be bad. The scrutiny Michigan and Harbaugh are going to face if they lose tonight. Astronomic. I'm out of words. Social media craze. Harbaugh will be burned to the ground on social media, especially Twitter, if they lose to Rutgers tonight. That's all I'm saying. Just watch out. Just watch out. There's no pressure in Piscataway, baby. Only on the team that's coming from Ann Arbor. All right. We'll step aside and take a quick break. On the other side, rapid fire picks segment. Give my 5 picks. We are 21, 22, and 2 on the season. Let's see if we can get that 5-0 week we've been looking for. We were 2-3 last week, so we did fall back below 500. Unfortunately, speaking of Tulsa, by the way, we were talking about it earlier in the show. We had SMU over Tulsa last week to plus 2.5. Didn't work out, of course. Rutgers failed us last week, and Army. I don't know what that was against Tulane, but those were our 3 losses last week. All right, take a quick break. On the other side, picks coming up on College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Now back to College Football Pick'em with Nick Kosko, presented by Harbor Jiu Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Welcome back to College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. We are presented by Harbor Jiu Jitsu, located inside the Attila's Gym in Egg Harbor Township. All right, rapid fire. It is picks time. 21, 22, and 2 on the season. 5 games here for Nick's Picks, of course, as you can also hear that segment on Back Your Play with Rich Quinones on Wednesdays at 4:20. Of course, Rich hosts Back Your Play 4 to 6 on Tuesdays and Wednesdays on this very station. Check him out. Of course, follow him on Twitter at RichQ. A lot of content, and it's football season, and this is not an NFL show, but of course, we have Rich and I have a little bit of back and forth with our Eagles and Giants, and for baseball, I'm a Philly guy all the way through except for baseball. I'm a Red Sox fan, and we have our little battles with our Red Sox and the Yankees. So we tend to go back and forth with each other on either Twitter or, of course, during our segment. We like to prod each other a little bit, get the juices flowing. A little friendly rivalry in this studio. All right, let's start out with these picks. That's enough about that. Let's actually talk some college football here. All right. We're going to go down the line here. We're going to start out with Appalachian State and Coastal Carolina. That is our first game. Coastal Carolina undefeated. We talked about them earlier in the show as it relates to potentially the college football playoff. Now, I mean, they're not getting in, folks. I mean, it was, a Sun Belt team. Again, if any Group of 5 schools getting in, it's going to be Cincinnati. But, you look at Coastal Carolina, they've dominated pretty much everybody. They had a close game against Georgia Southern, 28-14, in terms of their lesser opponents. When they also went on the road and beat previously ranked number 21 Louisiana at the time. So they beat them 30-27. But they've beaten everybody by double digits except for Louisiana. And I expect probably another close one. We're talking maybe single digits, but they are a 5.5-point favorite at home. And just the way they are playing, App State, they're in the thick of things now as well. They're 6-1. Their only loss was to Marshall, 17-7. But they've bounced back in a big way. But they've beaten Campbell, Arkansas State, Louisiana Monroe, Texas State, and Georgia State. I mean, not murderer's row here. Coastal Carolina, same thing with their schedule, but they've played a little bit more legit in layman's terms. So I just like the way Coastal Carolina is rolling. And we had them initially last week when they were -11 at Troy, but that game was canceled due to COVID-19 concerns. So I like Coastal Carolina. They're back at home. They've had 2 weeks to prepare for Appalachian State now. So I'm going to roll with the Chanticleers here, -5.5. Their quarterback, Coastal Carolina, Grayson McCall, playing really well. 16 touchdown passes, about 1,400 yards on the season. I mean, they are scoring, over 30 games. So the over might be a nice play in this one as well. LSU Arkansas is our next game. LSU, again, they are a shell of themselves from last year when they were the national champions. Of course, they lost pretty much everybody. Can't really blame them. But Arkansas is on a roll. I can't really say on a roll. Let me slow down. Arkansas 3-4 on the season, but they are a little bit more legit than they were last season. And again, the way LSU's been playing this year, I just don't trust them. Miles Brennan not playing. It's just so hard for me to trust LSU. They lose a shootout to Mississippi State. Mike Leach's first game back in the SEC. And Mississippi State has looked nothing like that since then. LSU beats up Vanderbilt. Okay, great. They lose to Missouri. Postponed game against Florida. They beat up South Carolina. And they got dominated by Auburn last week. Or 2 weeks ago, sorry. And they had a game against Alabama postponed. So, I really don't know what to make of LSU. I can't tell if they're actually going to be decent and around a 500 team or they're just not that good. And I'm leaning towards they're just not that good right now. They have firepower. But they lost a lot of it when Jamar Chase opted out. He was their best receiver after Justin Jefferson went to the NFL this past April. They haven't really had it. And without Miles Brennan playing, you're going to rely on Terrace Marshall to carry your offense as a wide receiver? I don't think so. So, again, Arkansas is the home dog, +2. I like Arkansas to win this game outright. Just because they're at home. We'll see how it plays out at noon, but the fact that Arkansas is a home dog, it gives me that extra incentive to pick them. So, we're going to roll with the Razorbacks. They seem, Felipe Franks is playing really well. Their quarterback, the former Florida quarterback. So I'm going to roll with Arkansas +2 over LSU. Cincinnati UCF. Now, we talked about Cincinnati a lot earlier in the show, how they can make the college football playoff, and I just believe Cincinnati is a team of destiny this year. Whether they make the Final Four or not, but they have something special. Luke Fickell is a heck of a coach. Now, is he going to start getting Power 5 offers after the year, particularly if this team is undefeated? Yeah, he will. He already turned down Michigan State, and he signed an extension with Cincinnati, but that doesn't mean Power 5 teams, i.e. Michigan, or somebody is going to say, hey, Luke, upgrade a little bit. Now, again, we're talking big hypotheticals, but what if Cincinnati made the playoff as a Group of 5 team? Would Luke Fickell leave, or would he just demand even more money from Cincinnati? He already got the extension, folks. I'll tell you what, if Fickell can make Cincinnati a playoff team, I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but again, I have no knowledge of how. I have no knowledge of what it means to get, $8-10 million a year thrown at me, or for to be a Power 5 head coach. But if Luke Fickell is making good money with Cincinnati right now and just signed an extension, and you get your team to the playoff why wouldn't you use that as a recruiting tool to make Cincinnati a Group of 5 power, and maybe down the line you join the Big 12 or something like that? And I think it's totally possible. I've mentioned that before. Cincinnati is a candidate, I would say, to join a Power 5 conference, because these conferences never remain stagnant for too long. I could see Cincinnati with some pedigree behind them joining a Power 5 conference, and then where's Fickle going? He'll get the Power 5 generated money from the conference. He ain't going anywhere. But in any event, they are by far the best Group of 5 team this year. UCF is very good, but they didn't really fall out of favor with me, but they have 2 losses already. And the fact that Cincinnati, I know they're a road favorite, but it's just under a touchdown. It's at 6 points. And again, that's dangerous for pushes with missed extra points and maybe overtime games, but I do like Cincinnati to cover that. They've beaten everybody by double digits. I will roll with that again. Give me Cincinnati -6 at Central Florida. Liberty at NC State. Now, I like Liberty, as I think a lot of people do now. The number 21 in the country. NC State, they don't have Devin Leary at quarterback anymore. He got hurt. And Liberty's rolling right now. They're coming off a dominating victory over WCU. Western Carolina, by the way. That was Western Carolina's only game. Liberty has to just schedule games wherever they can get them. But they already beat Virginia Tech this year. They've beaten Syracuse. They've beaten 2 Power 5 teams in the ACC. So, give them number 3 against NC State. They have UMass and Coastal Carolina coming. That's going to be a good game, by the way. Coastal Carolina, Liberty on December 5th. Ooh, I'm looking forward to that one. Particularly if they're both undefeated. Wouldn't that be fascinating? But Hugh Freeze has done a heck of a job with Liberty. He signed an extension. People are thinking, all right, maybe Hugh Freeze is the next South Carolina head coach. Who knows? Maybe he'll go back to the SEC eventually. But for what he's done with this program this year, they were 8-5 last year. They're already 8-0 this year. Plus 3.5 on the road. NC State, as I mentioned before, does not have Devin Leary. I like Liberty. Willis, good dual threat quarterback. He's very efficient with the football. 15 touchdowns, 1,600 yards. He's on pace to probably run for 1,000 yards. The kid's only thrown 1 pick. I don't know if Liberty plays ball control and they're safe. I'll tell you what. If NC State stops Malik Willis, then NC State has the inside track to winning, but no one's really been able to stop him so far. I mean, the kid has 2,300 yards combined through the air and on the ground, and he's got 24 touchdowns combined through the ground and the air. Air and the ground, I should say. He's a quarterback first. Come on. NC State at home, they have the advantage, but I like that plus 3.5 because I feel like this could be a field goal game either way. And that 3.5 means take that. Liberty plus 3.5 at NC State. All right, final game, USC at Utah. USC, they're 2-0, but it's almost like they are I can't say a fake 2-0, but it's not a legit 2-0 in my mind. They had to get a miracle to come back against Arizona State the other week, and then they beat Arizona on the road by 4 points. Utah has not played yet this year. This is the only reason why I'm going to lean USC here at -3. It's close on paper with the line. I feel like USC could win this game again by maybe a touchdown, maybe by 4 points like last week. So that's the reason why I'm going with USC. They have the game experience. Keaton Slovis is kind of settling down now, settling in. He had a great freshman year last year. He's a really good quarterback. Utah just has not played yet, and I don't think Utah is as good as last year's team that made the Pac-12 championship game. So just by that logic, my head's telling me USC. Sometimes you go with your gut over your head, but it's tough to make out this game. But the fact that this line is so close, and I do think USC is going to win outright, I'll take a chance. We'll go USC -3 on the road. So quick recap: we have Coastal Carolina -5.5, Arkansas +2, Cincinnati -6. Liberty +3.5, and USC -3. All right, those are my 5 picks. We are 21, 22, and 2 on the season. That is going to do it for me. Enjoy the games today, folks. Go Rutgers. Let's see if they knock Jim Harbaugh out of a job in Ann Arbor. I don't know if anybody to lose their job, but again, all pressure's on Michigan today, folks. All pressure's on Michigan tonight against Rutgers. That'll do it for me. Follow the station on Twitter at 1490 SportsBet. Follow me on Twitter at Nick Kosko59. Catch us next week. Happy Thanksgiving in a couple days to you all out there. Enjoy the college football. It's been College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.